morning, it's November 24th, and this is To My Liberal Friends. Well, I keep asking where the Democratic Party is headed, and every week I get information that further confuses the question. But if I look at the bulk of the evidence, I have to come to the conclusion they're moving further and further to the left. They celebrate the wins of Zohran Mamdani in New York and Katie Wilson in Seattle, and both are avowed socialists. Both make campaign promises to attract voters by saying they will make things free and make the cities more affordable. But they don't seem to have a clue about how to pay for these things other than raising taxes on somebody other than the voters they want. Then we have the case of 6 members of Congress, all either former military intelligence people, so they should know better, telling servicemen and women to disobey orders if they think they're illegal. As a veteran, I find these comments ill-advised and possibly damaging to the chain of command. The chain of command is essential in the military. When you give an order, you expect it to be carried out. You don't expect someone down the line to question the order and then refuse to obey it because they believe it to be an illegal order. One of those 6 members, Senator Lisa Slotkin, Democrat from Michigan, was pressed on this yesterday on ABC. The host of This Week, Martha Raddatz, asked Slotkin the direct question, quote, "Do you believe President Trump has issued any illegal orders?" End quote. The Michigan senator waffled in her response, quoting her, "To my knowledge, I'm not aware of things that are illegal, but certainly there's some legal gymnastics that are going on with these Caribbean strikes and everything related to Venezuela." End quote. There's the answers that should tell you everything you need to know. She could not identify one illegal order, but she said she has some questions about Trump's strikes on Venezuelan drug runners. This is a political question and something that Congress can certainly address, but she was out of bounds, along with her 5 other Democrats, to tell or even suggest that members of the military can refuse to obey an order simply because they believe it to be an illegal one. Slotkin then went on to other political issues, the use of National Guard force in places like D.C. and Chicago, where crime was out of control. Quoting her, "When you look at these videos coming out of a place like Chicago, it makes me incredibly nervous that we're about to see people in law enforcement, people in uniform, military, get nervous, get stressed, shoot at American civilians." End quote. Now, she ignores that some of these protesters turned to violence and rammed law enforcement vehicles, and in a couple of cases opened fire on them. Slotkin then went on to cover her ass by saying that individual soldiers should go to the JAG office on a case-by-case basis and ask them for an opinion. How's that going to work out on the battlefield? Just how will that work when a soldier refuses to obey an order in that situation and says, "I want to go talk to a JAG officer"? I can tell you, as somebody who's been there, it don't work. Where were these Democratic politicians when past presidents directed military actions abroad without congressional approval? What about when Barack Obama ordered the use of Predator assassination drones that on one occasion killed an American citizen? Well, you guessed it, they were mute because Obama was not Trump. Now, all of these are issues for Congress to address, and Slotkin and her fellow video members can certainly bring them up in the House and Senate because that's the appropriate place to bring them up. Democrats, of course, are defending these rash statements, but they're on tenuous ground doing so. There are examples from our past where politicians have refused to obey the law, but they have apparently not learned anything in those instances. Going back to the origin of the Civil War, we had Jefferson Davis ordering the South Carolina military forces to attack the federal garrison of Fort Sumter. This ignited the Civil War. Let's move closer to our time. Alabama Governor George Wallace vowed to use his state law enforcement officers to nullify a federal law in integrating schools. Even closer is Democrats calling those that attacked the Capitol on January 6th insurrectionists. And today these same Democrats call for nullification of federal laws they don't like. Democrats weirdly boast of subordination of the Constitution to international statutes. Our governors and mayors in blue states and cities take neo-Confederate vows to oppose the national government's right to protect its own property, to direct its own employees, and to enforce our shared federal laws. Over a decade ago, some 600, quote, sanctuary cities declared they were immune from the full enforcement of federal law. They further boasted they would not hand over illegal aliens detained by state and local authorities to federal agents. But prior to that, you heard grandstanders of the Democratic Party like Bill and Hillary Clinton, along with Nancy Pelosi, vow to stop all illegal immigrants from unlawfully entering the United States. Barack Obama said basically the same thing. But they changed their tune when Biden allowed millions to flow across the border, and the Democratic strategists told them this could be a new wave of Democratic voters. Democratic politicians suffering from a severe case of Trump derangement syndrome seem to think they can ignore federal laws and substitute their own. Recently, Pelosi, that octogenarian who's finally retiring, warned that federal officers might be arrested in California if Gavin Newsom determines that their enforcement of federal law somehow violates California law. I suggest they both go back to law school. Federal law trumps state law. Mayor-elect Zoe Mandami has boasted in the past that he would soon override federal law as mayor of New York and arrest Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu should he arrive at the UN headquarters in New York. I want you to note that Mandami did not issue a comparable threat to communist Chinese delegations who are killing millions, nor to Nigerians who have been killing over 150,000 Christians, or not even Vladimir Putin, who caused the war in Ukraine that has resulted in 1.5 million deaths. So the answer to the question about where the Democratic Party is headed becomes clear. They're headed to the left. In affording what would appear to be as insurrectionist policies as their new norm, then the American public will have to stand up and refute them, and that's at the ballot box. It's been To My Liberal Friends. Thanks for listening.